Alright, hello, welcome back. This is Uncharted, Lost Legacy. I'm replaying it, but I've reversed the image for it, so that, because of the way the game, when you do it, you'd think it'd be kind of easy to follow the game. It's just exact same thing as before, only backwards. However, in my experience, it's almost like playing a new game, especially since your instincts send you in the opposite direction of where you had previously played before. And you sometimes forget that it's backwards, and sometimes you can psych yourself out on it. But one of the things I'm going to talk about... Whew, okay, that scared me. In this game is an interesting topic. I've only heard of this recently, so I'm going to presume that this is a fairly new philosophical concept, or at least the phraseology is new. And that's of cultural appropriation. Now, an interesting thing about cultural appropriation, where it concerns with video games, is that every time you play a video game, you essentially appropriate the video game culture. Whew. Come on. I thought I was going to fall off there. Whew. Scary. So, for example, basically, not every single video game, but every video game where you don't create your own character, you're appropriating the character that you have just that you're playing. So, in this case, the main character that's played by Claudia Black here. She is.
Copy that, Cobra One.
Okay, there we go. Got him. She's half British, half Indian, and a woman. I am neither of those things. None of those things. And so, I'm essentially appropriating her own character. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And indeed, in video games, I think it's actually a positive thing. You get to experience what it's like to be a different person or different character, or at the very least, imagine what it would be like. It's not exactly the same thing as actually being the person, but it makes for a change, and I think it does increase your understanding of the world. But interestingly enough, let's see. Okay, I go this way here. If I were to do the same with, say, character. If I were to, say, go to a convention and cosplay as the character of Bayek from Assassin's Creed Origins, that would be considered to be very inappropriate for me to have done that, because I'm not Egyptian, and it would be considered even more inappropriate if I were to, let's see if I can get this out that way. Nope, I have to take it around. If I were to darken my skin from its normal shade to the shade that Bayek's skin is, that would be considered to be even more inappropriate and culturally insensitive for me to do that. And that's part of my confusion about cultural appropriation. It is in regards to that sort of thing. It's appropriate for me to play someone who's a different culture, different color, different everything in pretty much every game. I mean, if I were playing Clue, it'd be appropriate for me to play any of the characters in that game. Male, female, whatever. But it suddenly becomes cultural appropriation if I were to dress up as someone from a different culture. And yeah, so, and part of my, so initially I was going to do this entire video, just go through the entire thing of cultural appropriation in this video and be done with it. Well, interestingly, it's not really an unfortunate thing. one of the things I discovered was that there's many different facets to this once I started to look into it and research what I needed to do for this, to do this video. And as such, I'm going to break the video down a little bit and do different aspects of cultural appropriation and how they relate to these video games. And one of the aspects, or the aspects I'm going to do this time deals with the definition. Oh, wait, going the other way. See, you saw that. That's the mirror world right there, going the wrong way. My main issue, or confusion, I should say, about cultural appropriation deals with definition of the same thing. I mean, how do you define this?
This will just take a minute.
So, if I were to go... wait, gonna pick the lock here. And part of the problem, it seems to me, is that it has a very loose definition. Now...
Oh, that works. Let's find that disc.
Now, one of the problems with loose definition is it becomes very easy for whatever you're defining to be abused if the definition isn't a very strict definition, especially when it applies to things like rules or regulations or stuff of that sort.
How much do you think it's worth?
Now,
enough to keep his little insurrection going for quite some time.
pretty stuff.
Salah and the tiger. Maybe he's closer than I thought.
So let me give you an example of that. And this abuse that I'm talking about isn't necessarily a deliberate abuse. It's just that there are different people will define the things differently, and as such, it can create a great deal of confusion when dealing with that. With these definitions.
Where's that map?
So that having been said, well, let me give you an example of this confusion. So, several years ago, I was working at a fairly large company. There were several managers I was working for, and I was approached by one of the managers and asked, told I wasn't complying with one of the rules, which I didn't know about this particular rule, and given specifics on what I should do to comply with this rule. At which point I agreed and started to comply with the rule. Well, a few days later, a different manager approached me and told me I still wasn't complying with the rule, and gave me different specifics on how to obey this particular rule. Now, this I found a little bit confusing, but I tried to comply, and then a third manager essentially did the exact same thing. So I was told by 3 different people that I wasn't obeying a certain rule, and then I was told 3 different ways I should be obeying the rule. And this was a little confusing for me, so I did what I felt was the next logical thing. I asked to see, can I see a written copy of this rule, so I know what I should be doing, how I should obey it, and so on. And I requested this several times, and about a month passed, and I never got to see the rule written down. And then I started basically doing what was most convenient for me to do, which wasn't exactly well, it wasn't what one of the managers had told me to do it a certain way, and I did it a more convenient way because I kept getting told different things about the rule, and they would not give me a written version of the rule, and as such, I find it unreasonable. I did then, I still do now, to be expected to obey a rule where I don't even understand what the rule is. I find that to be unreasonable, and if I can't get a hard copy of that rule, I don't see how they can expect me to obey it.
Right.
Well,
about that.
Managers see the rule differently, and I was expected to obey it, apparently, because I was actually written up for not following and obeying the rule, which is a little bit more serious than being told that I'm not obeying the rule. And when I queried this and said, I've been told several different things, and I couldn't get nobody would give me an actual copy of the rule, so I don't know what is the rule or not.
What are you doing? 3 Persian
And once I,
invasions, 3 separate wars, and all
I
these
mentioned
years
this,
later,
and then
no
I was
one
told
has
that
found it.
apparently this specific
We're close.
rule
You're lost.
had never
And the
been written
only
down.
chance you
The
have
corporate
of even
office had
narrowing
never
down its location
written
is to find
an actual
someone
rule
who
for
can
this.
help you.
And I was told basically that the managers could define the rule however they wanted to. So essentially,
Someone with an extensive
whatever a
knowledge of
manager
human
said,
society.
that was the rule.
Exactly.
And so on. And, you know, to this day I find it very confusing,
Culture
and,
history.
you know,
rates are
it could have been a lot worse. That a lot of what they were saying could have been
Parasite
more mutually exclusive, and I could have,
who
you know,
exploits us
gotten in trouble no matter what I did.
in order to fatten
In
their
this case, yeah, I had, you know, while waiting, yeah, I more or less
that's a no.
deliberately disobeyed one of the managers. And, yeah, I can see why they would write me up, but,
I like that.
you know, this rule was
But I
so
don't need
loosely
any more so-called
defined
experts.
that obeying it became
Shoot
very
them, throw
difficult,
their bodies in
and
the river.
it becomes
No
more
need.
convoluted and
Throw
more
ourselves out.
complex. So, gotta do some running here. Yay. So,
Come on! We need to get across the river!
So, like I said, the more convoluted or the more loosely defined a rule is, the less easy it is to obey the rule for anybody. And when you have a rule of behavior, like cultural appropriations, you're not supposed to appropriate other cultures. Fair enough, I'll try not to appropriate other cultures. But when you can't define what actions actually qualify as cultural appropriations,
Quick!
then yeah, you're going to have problems. So that was kind of the first look at cultural appropriation, and they'll relate a little bit more to video games in future videos. But I like and subscribe if you like this, and I will see you in the next video. And we'll leave these two arguing.
You were
Bye.
going to give me up.